So, what does Bill English himself say about it? I spoke to him just before we came on air and began by asking him what he would describe as its main standout points.
Oh, two things. It consolidates the surpluses so New Zealanders know that when the government finances are stable, then the support for them is secure. And that's a better outlook than a lot of developed countries. Secondly, it's investing in some long-term gains, both in innovation in the economy and in improving some of our more intractable social problems.
Okay, let's talk about the consolidation. That's a dull word. Peter Dunn has called you boring, which is a bit like, I guess, the Pope criticising you for being a Catholic. But it is almost willfully boring, or anodyne, isn't it? You are going out of your way to not cause offence with this budget, but I wonder where the vision is.
Well, look, there's plenty there. In fact, some of it has become a bit, everyone's got used to it. So the extension of the social investment program now embedded in the budget process is pretty new, and it's a 20 to 30 year vision about how we can change lives, particularly the most vulnerable lives. And I think the other aspect of it is around this recognition that for the economy to keep growing, to keep delivering the tax revenue and the choices, we need to do more to back our innovators, our scientists and our entrepreneurs. Now that's not a new toolkit, but this is a very good time to be applying it because unlike most developed countries, we have a reasonably positive economic outlook through to 2020.
Absolutely, and you use the word choices, and you're looking at a surplus of, $6 billion by 2020?
Yes, that's right. They're a bit low at the moment, then they rise pretty quickly.
Yeah, they do. Right, okay, so $6 billion by 2020 gives you choices. It seems that there are two being offered up at the moment. One is debt reduction, the other is tax cuts. Is that it?
No, that's not it. I think the other choice alongside those, or two others, one is saving for the future. We have a super fund sitting there that hasn't had contributions go into it now for 8 or 9 years. And the other is, through the social investment framework, the opportunity to put more money into changing people's lives, and we're setting up the framework that allows us to do it. In this budget, we've done some for schooling, for the reforms for care and protection for our most vulnerable children, and there'll be a lot more of it to come.
Okay, this is very targeted. The stuff you're talking about schooling, you are targeting the most vulnerable children in socioeconomic terms, right? Is that foreshadowing a new approach that we will see more of in the years ahead?
Well, look, it's careful in education. That amount of funding is 1% of the total operational spending across the system. But yes, it is. It's less about targeting individuals and more about understanding what we need to do to change the lives of people who are on a course where intuitively it's not going to turn out well. People who spend 20 years on the lowest income in New Zealand on a benefit. If we can do something about that, we should. That's now becoming embedded in the budget process, but it can only be successful if we have the resource available from the economy to make the investments that are logical.
Okay, why aren't you doing more to change their lives? I mean, if we want to be brutally frank about it, you have an opposition who the polls tell us are pretty weak. You have a government who are still polling really well this far into their third term. Couldn't you have been more visionary? Couldn't you have taken more risks? Shamabeel Jacob says, hey, the cost of debt is really, really low at the moment. Couldn't you have done the kind of targeting you're talking about doing in the future more immediately?
Look, you can always argue that, but we would say that we've done as much as we believe can be effective. You have to understand that particularly for the delivery of public services, we're reorientating the whole government public service system, and that's not a rapid process, and nor should it be a radical one. With respect to what I think Mr. Equab would be referring to, and that's investment in infrastructure. If you look at the budget numbers, we've actually doubled the amount that's going to be spent on capital from 2013 to 2017. So this next year, we'll actually spend $6 billion on capital investment, double the amount of 4 or 5 years ago. So we are making those investments because we think they're worthwhile, not just because debt's cheap.
If we look at the narrative of the past couple of weeks, and that is the people doing it tremendously tough, and I know you have to govern for everyone, but I also know that you want to drag those people up. What about this budget does that?
Well, at the core of the issues that have been highlighted in the last couple of weeks is a pretty challenging proposition. Bad urban planning causes poverty. And we've argued now for 2 or 3 years, and I think now it's being a bit broadly...
Bill, so hold on a second. You're not going to talk about the unitary plan here, are you? You're not going to blame the Auckland City Council for this, are you? I mean, I'm asking you, what about your budget drags people up?
Okay, so if you take the kind of cases you've been looking at, some of which are a bit more complex than have been represented, we have enough money to buy all the places that we can get in Auckland. It's in a sense a very simple constraint. Even though Auckland is completing 40 houses a week, they need to complete more simply so we can find the houses. The government can't wave a magic wand. Money is not a problem. We can fund the places, the houses, if we can find them. But 20 years of misdirected planning and process in Auckland and actually in other cities, this was the case in Christchurch 5 years ago, have made it very difficult for them to adapt rapidly to the growing demand for housing. So if we can find the houses, we can put those people in them.
Okay, so let's set all of that aside. Aren't you effectively saying, actually, we haven't done terribly much at all to drag those people up? And does that mean that is not a high priority for you? If you keep deferring to the unitary plan, if you keep saying, hey, Auckland Council, the ball's in your court, does that mean you are telling us that you have other priorities, perhaps tax cuts, perhaps debt reduction, and there will be people who are happy to see those things, but why don't you be explicit about the fact that they are your priorities?
Because it's not correct. We have, I think, procured in the last couple of years 1,400 new social housing places in Auckland. In this budget, there's room for around about 1,000 more, 750 funded directly in this budget. So the money is sitting there. We have to find the houses. And I know it's hard for people to understand, it's that simple. When the houses are available, and we will pay it. And in fact, in parts of Auckland, we're paying effective subsidies of $700 and $800 a week to get lower income people into houses. So the money is not the problem. We've allocated more than enough money for the houses that are currently available. That is why the other part of the equation is really important, the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which will be out in a few weeks to be consulted on in detail. It will be about being a bit more directive with our councils about the need to ensure more housing supply.
This feels like a holding pattern budget, and of course it's a midterm and governments do that, and you're certainly not the first government to do that, and you are building towards surpluses which are getting larger. But something special has to happen next year, doesn't it, in order to make material changes to people, or are you going to be stuck within the paradigm of orthodoxy which this budget exists in? Surplus, tax cuts, not much else.
No, I disagree. We had a pretty interesting budget last year, first increase in benefits in 43 years.
Fair point.
To the extent that everyone needs to see the benefits of growth. In this budget, we are further continuing a process of changing what has been often misdirected and occasionally completely useless public services provided to the most disadvantaged. That's a process that's now got pretty broad support in our view. And we're putting hundreds of millions into that and billions into health. So in the past, those would have been regarded as pretty significant new initiatives. It's in a way reassuring that everyone regards it as business as usual. And certainly next year, in the run-up to an election, all the parties will be looking at growing surpluses. So you can be sure that there'll be plenty of innovation and hard thinking about how to use those.
Bill English, Finance Minister.